My mother almost couldn't hold back her laugh when she said that piece of road suited me. What's that saying again? Opposites attract? No. In your case, Evelyn, you always attract what nobody wants. And then she actually smiled, along with the others who clearly thought I was the highlight of the moment. After that, I didn't have any doubts left. In that family, I had a very specific place. Not the daughter, not the niece. Definitely not someone to be taken seriously. I was the one who ended up with whatever was left, the one who didn't argue, the one they looked at like I had always been worth a little less than everyone else. The reading of my Aunt Nancy's will happened 3 days after the funeral, in the main room of the farmhouse. The windows were open, the smell of soil drifting in with the breeze, and the silence in that room had a strange weight to it. It wasn't grief. It was anticipation. My mother was already seated near the head of the table. My siblings were close to her. Everyone had that quiet confidence of people who believe things will go exactly the way they always do. My name is Evelyn. I'm 34. I grew up in that house being compared for as long as I can remember. At first, it came disguised as advice, criticism delivered like care. My mother, Martha, always knew how to do that like she was playing a role. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like love. My Aunt Nancy, her sister, was the opposite. She didn't say much, but she taught me to notice what nobody else thought mattered. A crooked paper, a forgotten paragraph, a detail too small to bother anyone. I never understood why she insisted on that. Not until that day. When the lawyer started reading, nothing surprised me. The house went to my mother. The fields, the barns, the equipment were divided between my siblings. The farm's name, the contracts, everything that actually held value, went exactly where everyone expected it to go. Then he said my name. He paused longer than necessary. It was almost irritating, but it was enough. Evelyn Vance inherits the strip of land registered along the main driveway, including the access gatehouse and the area described in the corresponding lot. For a second, everyone went quiet, but not for long. The laughter came right after. The comments, the looks. My mother crossed her arms and looked at me with that satisfied expression, like the document had just confirmed something she had always believed about me. Even dead, Nancy managed to be useless, she said. But honestly, that piece fits you. You've always lived off what's left over. I didn't respond. I just reached out when the lawyer handed me the copy. The paper was simple. A photocopy. Nothing that stood out. But there was something there. One line about the access. I didn't stare at it long enough to draw attention. Just enough to remember. I folded the paper calmly, like there was nothing there worth discussing. Stood up. And left before they could keep going. Outside, the air felt cleaner. The driveway cut through the entire property, leading out to the main entrance, and the gatehouse sat exactly where it always had. Small, ignored, almost erased by everything around it. I walked over without rushing. When I stopped in front of it, I looked at the plaque fixed beside the driveway, darkened with time, covered in dust and rust. No one had looked at it in years. The kind of thing that could disappear and nobody would even notice. I stood there for a few seconds, the paper in my pocket, thinking about what I had read. That's when something started to settle in. It wasn't about getting less. It was about them deciding that for me, without really looking. If you've ever realized people laughed too early, leave a like. Some things seem small in the moment, but they say everything about people who think they've already figured it all out. And that road wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I didn't go back inside right away. I stayed by the driveway, looking at the plaque like it might say something different if I gave it more time. It didn't. It just sat there, worn down, ignored long enough to disappear into the background. That alone told me enough. People don't ignore things that matter. They ignore what they've already decided has no value. I stepped closer and ran my hand over the metal, brushing away a thin layer of dust. This time, I didn't stop at the surface. I kept going, clearing more of it, pressing along the edges, feeling where it met the concrete. That's when I noticed it. The plaque wasn't just attached. It was set deep into the ground. I crouched slightly, looking closer at the base. The metal plate was anchored into a block of concrete that didn't match the rest of the driveway. It was older, denser, deliberate, not decorative, structural. I stood back up slowly and looked past it, following the line of the road as it cut through the property. The more I looked, the harder it was to ignore what had been sitting there the whole time. The driveway wasn't just passing through the land. It defined it. Everything behind it depended on that entry point. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket and opened it again, slower now, lining up the wording with what I was seeing in front of me. The same line stood out, but it didn't feel small anymore. It felt precise, intentional. From the house, I could still hear voices. My mother's stood out without effort, calm, certain, already moving on, like nothing had shifted. I looked back at the plaque, then at the road, then at the paper in my hand. Then I folded it again. Carefully this time, because whatever that strip of land was, it wasn't an afterthought. I didn't leave the property. I just stopped walking and stayed near the driveway, far enough from the house for their voices to blur into background noise, but close enough to keep looking at the one thing they had all dismissed, like it meant nothing. I took the paper out of my pocket again, not to read all of it, just that one line about the access. The wording was still there, dry and exact, the kind of sentence nobody notices unless they already know where to look. I followed the road slowly with my eyes. It cut through the entire property and pulled everything behind it together. There was no real second entrance, no cleaner way around, no easy alternative hidden somewhere else. If anyone wanted to come in or out, they came through there. The simplicity of it made it worse. It meant nobody had missed something complicated. They had ignored something obvious. I walked to the gatehouse and pushed the door open. It stuck a little before giving in, like nobody had touched it properly in years. Inside, it smelled like old wood and dust, but not ruin, just neglect. There was a chair near the window, a narrow desk, a rusted hook on the wall, the shape of a place people had stopped seeing because nothing about it looked impressive. I stood there for a moment and looked out again, and from that angle the whole thing made even more sense. The driveway didn't just cross the land, it controlled the movement through it. Every truck, every delivery, every visitor, every person who thought they owned something beyond that point depended on that strip of access without even thinking about it. I stepped back outside and went straight to the plaque again. This time I cleaned more of it, enough to read it properly. The metal was rough under my hand, the edges colder where the dust had been thicker. I read every word without rushing, then looked back down at the folded paper in my other hand. That was when the last piece started settling into place. Not like shock, more like recognition. My Aunt Nancy hadn't left me something small. She had left me something ignored. And there's a difference. Small things get dismissed. Ignored things keep doing their job whether anyone respects them or not. I looked once more at the road stretching past the gatehouse and into the land they were already busy dividing inside that house. And for the first time, I understood why she had trusted me with it. By the time I walked back into the house, they were already talking over each other. Nobody stopped when I came in. Nobody asked where I'd been. They were dividing things that hadn't even been processed yet, talking about sales, timelines, and next steps like everything was already settled. My mother was leading it, calm as ever, already organizing a future she believed was secure. "We should move on the south field first," my sister said. "Of course," my mother replied. "That's the only part worth moving quickly." Then my brother added, "Access won't be a problem. We'll clear the main road by the end of the week." That word landed differently now. Access. I stayed where I was for a second, listening to them use it so casually, like it already belonged to them, like it wasn't something that could ever be questioned. "Will you?" I said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. The room shifted, just slightly. My mother looked at me, not annoyed at first, curious. "What does that mean?" I walked over, set my bag on the table, and rested my hand on it. "Nothing," I said. It just sounds like a lot of planning. No, one of my brothers let out a quiet laugh, like I'd missed my own point. My sister didn't react. She just watched me, waiting for me to say something that would make this easier to dismiss. My mother held my gaze a moment longer, like she was deciding whether I was worth the interruption. Then she looked away. "We don't need complications right now," she said. "We need things moving. I'm not stopping anything." "No," she said, almost absent-mindedly. "You never do." That landed exactly how she meant it to. Not praise, placement. I didn't respond. She picked up a folder and continued like nothing had happened. "Make sure you're out by tomorrow. We'll need that space clear." Of course. No argument, no hesitation. That would have been expected. I picked up my bag again and turned toward the door. No one stopped me. No one asked what I meant. No one followed the question I'd left hanging in the room. Because in their heads, nothing had changed. They kept talking as I walked out, still planning around movement, timing, access, and that was the part they hadn't understood yet. They were organizing everything around something they didn't control anymore. I didn't go far. I stopped near the driveway again as the light started to drop. The road looked different at that hour. Longer, quieter, like it stretched further than the land itself. The plaque caught the last of the sun, just enough to throw a dull line of light across the concrete where it was set. Not bright, not impressive, but fixed. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, not moving, just watching the shadow of the gate stretch across the road. No voices carried from the house anymore. No laughter. No one calling my name. Even the wind had settled down. The whole place felt paused, like the property itself was holding its breath without knowing why. For the first time that day, everything felt still. Not peaceful. Held. Like something was about to shift, but hadn't yet. I looked down the length of the driveway again, following it all the way to where it disappeared past the trees, and for a second it didn't feel like a leftover piece of land. It didn't feel like the joke they had handed me in that room, or the scrap my mother thought matched my place in the family. Standing there in the fading light, with the house behind me and the road in front of me, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like a line, a boundary, something that decided where things started and where they stopped. I thought about the way they had laughed when my name was called, how quickly they moved on once they were sure I had gotten the smallest piece. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the insult itself, the certainty behind it. The way they never even considered they might be looking at the wrong thing. How often do people laugh at the one thing they should have taken seriously? If you know that kind of silence before everything changes, subscribe. Because standing there, watching that road in the fading light, I knew one thing for certain. By morning, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. The next morning, I was already by the driveway when one of the farm trucks came down the road like it always did, steady and automatic, like nothing on that property had shifted overnight. That was the first thing that told me how sure they still were. My brother didn't slow down until I stepped forward near the gate. The brakes hit hard, gravel snapping under the tires, and the truck stopped a few feet from me. He leaned out the window with that same irritated look people get when they think the problem in front of them is smaller than their schedule. "What are you doing?" I looked at the crates in the back, then at him. "You're not taking this through here." He opened the door and jumped down. "Evelyn, move. We've got deliveries." "I know." "Then stop this." I stayed where I was. Calm. Still. Not trying to provoke him, not trying to win the moment. Just not moving. He came closer then. Not enough to make it look dramatic. Just enough to test whether I'd give way the way I usually had my whole life. I didn't. "You don't get to block the road because you're upset," he said. "This isn't because I'm upset." He laughed once, short and dismissive. "Then what is it?" I pulled the folded paper from my pocket and opened it just enough for him to see. "This." He looked, but not carefully. I could tell from his face he was reading it the way people read anything they've already decided can't matter. "That's the will," he said. "It's more than that." That was when his expression changed. Not into understanding, into uncertainty. He looked past me toward the gate, then back at the page in my hand. You need to talk to Mom. I will. What exactly are you saying? I folded the paper again, calm as before. I'm saying you're not driving through here until we get clear on what belongs to who. He didn't answer right away. And that pause, small as it was, changed the whole scene. Because for the first time, he wasn't talking to me like I was in the way. He was looking at me like I might actually be standing in the right place. The truck stayed where it was, and so did I. He didn't argue right away. That was the first real sign something had shifted. My brother just stood there for a second longer than I expected, looking past me at the road, then back at the truck, like he was trying to decide whether this was something he could force through or something he actually had to stop and think about. That hesitation mattered more than anything he could have said. Just move to the side, he said finally, but it didn't come out with the same certainty as before. It sounded more like he was testing whether I would fall back into the version of myself they were used to. I'm not moving, I said. He let out a breath through his nose, already irritated, but the confidence had cracked. Then he turned, walked back to the truck, leaned inside for a second, and I heard the engine shift before it went quiet. He turned it off. That was the part that stayed with me. No one in that family stopped unless they had to. They pushed, assumed, kept going, talked over people, and called it practicality. So watching him shut the truck down, even for a minute, told me this wasn't looking as simple to him as it had a few moments earlier. He came back toward me, slower this time. I'm calling Mom. I nodded once. That's probably best. He pulled out his phone and stepped a few feet away. I didn't need to hear the words to understand the conversation. I could already picture my mother answering with that same controlled tone, asking one sharp question, then another, trying to decide whether this was nonsense or inconvenience. At first, I knew she'd treat it like both. Then his posture changed. Small, but clear. His shoulders tightened. His head tilted. He looked over at me once, then again, like whatever she was saying had forced him to look at me differently than he had 5 minutes earlier. When he ended the call, he didn't come as close this time. She's coming, he said. All right. He glanced at the truck, then at the road behind me, and for the first time it looked like he was seeing it for what it actually was. Not just a stretch of gravel everybody used, but a point of control. Neither of us moved after that. We didn't need to. Because whatever this was about to become, it had already stopped being small. She didn't take long. I heard the second car before I saw it, moving slower than the truck, more controlled. That was my mother's way. She never rushed into a scene if she thought there was still time to understand it first. The car stopped a few feet behind the truck, and she stepped out already looking at me. Not at my brother, not at the road, at me. A day earlier, that would have been enough to make me shift, even if just a little. But not then. What is this? She asked as she walked toward us, her voice steady, like she hadn't raised it in years. I didn't answer right away. She stopped a few steps from me, crossed her arms, and glanced at the truck behind me. We have deliveries waiting, she said. Move. I'm not blocking anything, I replied. I'm just not letting it pass. That changed the way she looked at me. Not irritation, attention. On what basis? She asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled the paper out again, unfolding it calmly, without any rush, like the time there belonged to me now. This one. She took it. That was the difference between her and my brother. He looked fast and dismissed faster. My mother read carefully when something had even the smallest chance of affecting her. So I watched her face instead of the page. Nothing at first. Then a pause. Small, but real. She went back to the same line I had noticed and read it again. Then once more, slower this time, like she didn't trust what the first reading had suggested. The silence around us changed. Even my brother stopped talking. Finally, she lowered the page a little and looked at me. This doesn't mean what you think it means, she said. I didn't argue. I didn't say what I thought. That held her there for a second. because I wasn't trying to convince her. I was letting her get there on her own. She looked back at the paper, then past me, toward the road, the gate, the narrow point where everything had to pass. For the first time since she got there, she didn't have an answer ready. And with someone like my mother, that mattered. Because with her, it was never really about emotion. It was about control. And for the first time, she wasn't fully in it. She didn't hand the paper back right away. That was the first thing that stood out. My mother always returned things quickly when she didn't consider them important. A glance, a dismissal, and it was done. But this time, she kept it in her hand a few seconds longer than necessary, eyes moving over the same section again. Not confused, careful. "What exactly are you trying to do?" she asked, finally looking up. "I'm not trying to do anything," I said. "I'm just standing where I was told I own." That answer didn't irritate her. It slowed her down. She looked past me again, this time taking in more than just the road. The narrow entrance, the way the truck was positioned, the distance between the gate and the rest of the property. Details, the kind she usually noticed first. "Step aside," she said, but it came softer now. Not a command. Not yet. "No." The word didn't escalate anything. It just stayed there. My brother shifted his weight behind her, like he was waiting for her to take control of the situation again, to restore whatever balance had slipped. But she didn't move immediately. She looked at the paper one more time, then folded it slowly, more precise than before, and held it between her fingers instead of handing it back. "That strip," she said, almost to herself, "runs the entire length of the access." I didn't respond. She didn't need confirmation. She already had it. Her eyes moved again, this time following the road all the way through, not just the entrance. Calculating, reframing, adjusting. That was the moment everything shifted. Not out loud, not visibly for anyone who didn't know her. But I knew. Because for the first time, she wasn't looking at me like I was in the way. She was looking at the space around me, and what it connected. She handed the paper back then, carefully, different from before. "This isn't finished," she said. "No," I replied. "It isn't." Another pause. Then she stepped slightly to the side. Not enough to give up ground, but enough to show she wasn't moving forward either. Behind her, the truck stayed where it was, the engine off, the road quiet, and right there, in that stillness, everything they thought was already decided wasn't anymore. She didn't try to push past me. That was the part no one else seemed to fully register. My brother was still standing by the truck, waiting for her to take control the way she always did. To correct the situation, to put me back where I belonged and keep everything moving. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed where she was, just slightly off-center now, no longer directly in front of me, but not stepping back either. Her eyes moved once more along the driveway, slower this time, tracing it the way someone does when they're no longer looking at a path, but at what it controls. "You said the right expired?" she asked. 42 days ago." She nodded once. That was all. No reaction, no argument, just acceptance of information she couldn't dismiss. Behind her, my brother shifted again. "So what? We're just supposed to stop everything now?" She didn't even look at him. "Be quiet." That landed harder than anything said so far. Silence followed. Real silence this time. She stepped forward again, but not toward the road, toward me. Closer than before. Not confrontational. Measured. "You understand what you're implying," she said. "I do." "And you're certain?" "Yes." That was the moment she made the decision. Not out loud, not dramatically. Just a small shift in posture, a recalculation that settled into something firm. Then she turned, not to me, to the truck. "Turn it around," she said. My brother blinked. "What?" "Turn it around," she repeated, calmer this time. "We're not using this road today." He hesitated, looked at me, then back at her. You're serious? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. A few seconds later, the truck door opened again. The engine came back to life, louder now in the quiet that had taken over everything. Gravel shifted as he reversed slowly, carefully, like the space itself had changed without warning. I stepped aside just enough to let him maneuver, not out of permission, out of control. My mother watched the entire movement without saying a word. No frustration, no visible anger, just attention. When the truck finally cleared the entrance and pulled back down the road, she looked at me again. Different now. Not dismissive. Not superior. Aware. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I replied. "It's not." Another pause. Then she gave a small nod, almost too subtle to notice, and turned back toward the house. No more orders, no more assumptions, just silence. And for the first time, everything that moved on that land had to go through me. The strange part is that people like my mother never really believe they're taking too much. Not while the system still bends for them. They call it family, duty, tradition, common sense. Whatever helps them avoid saying the truth out loud. Maybe that's why moments like this don't feel loud when they happen. They feel quiet, precise. Like something finally moved back into the right place. Tell me what hits harder. Losing control all at once, or realizing too late that it was never really yours. Because in the end, it wasn't the house, the fields, or the name that held that place together. It was the road they laughed at when they thought it belonged to me alone.